Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open the story behind one of the most powerful laws on the books, and you will not believe where it gets its real muscle from. It all starts with a nearly forgotten 70-year-old case about a simple con man.
All right, so let me ask you a question. How on earth does a con artist from the 1950s become the key to prosecuting major crimes in the 21st century? The answer is, well, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, you've heard the name RICO thrown around, right? It's always in the headlines when they're talking about the mob or corruption or these huge, complicated criminal rings. But the real secret to its power, its engine, really, isn't what you think. It's hidden in this crazy story about a very, very smooth operator. So to find this secret ingredient, we've got to jump in the time machine. We're going way back, long before RICO was even a twinkle in a prosecutor's eye, back to the early 1950s. Okay, let's get into the story. And this thing doesn't kick off in some fancy courtroom or in Congress. Nope. It all starts with a classic, and honestly, a pretty gutsy confidence scheme. So the con was straight out of a movie. You've got this guy, Pereira, and he finds a wealthy widow in California. He turns on the charm, spins this whole story about a big hotel deal, and gets her to invest with him. And it worked. He walks away with a check for 35 grand. Now listen, that might not sound like a life-changing amount today, but back in the 50s, that was a ton of money. So what does he do? He drives to another city, cashes the check, and makes a run for it, all the way to Texas. Well, you know the FBI wasn't just going to let that slide. They tracked him down. But here's the twist. Because he crossed state lines, it's a federal case now. And the prosecutors, they don't just go for simple theft. Their whole strategy hinges on a very specific federal law, using the U.S. mail to commit a crime, mail fraud. And this is where the story gets really interesting. The important part isn't the con itself. It's this tiny, almost invisible detail about what happens after a bank cashes a check. Okay, so this slide just lays it all out. It's the whole legal fight in a nutshell. Pereira's lawyers are saying, look, the crime was over the second he got the cash. The bank mailed the check later. That's their business, not his. But the prosecutors, they had a totally different take, a much, much bigger view of the crime. So it all boiled down to this one question. When did the scheme actually end? Was it over the moment Pereira pocketed the money? Or did the whole process, including that automatic mailing between banks that he never even saw, count as part of his scheme? This tiny little legal point, it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And their answer? Man, it was going to change everything. All right, let's get to the decision, because this is where our case about one con artist in Texas starts to become something way, way bigger. And the Supreme Court came down hard against Pereira. They established what we now call the Pereira precedent. Basically, they said the crime wasn't finished when he got the cash. Nope, it kept going until that check officially cleared. And for that to happen, the mail had to be used. This just created this new, incredibly broad definition of what mail fraud could be. And this quote from the court just nails their logic. They said it doesn't matter if Pereira wasn't the one mailing anything. He caused the mailing to happen. He knew, or should have known, that cashing a check from another city would require the banks to use the mail to sort things out. That made the mailing an essential piece of his whole scheme. So here's the big takeaway from that. In a single ruling, the definition of mail fraud just got huge. It massively expanded the power of federal prosecutors. Suddenly, any crime that used the mail at any point, even as a predictable side effect, could be hit with a federal mail fraud charge. The net they could cast just got a whole lot wider. But you know, the story doesn't stop there in 1954. Not even close. In fact, the biggest impact of Pereira's little con was still 16 years down the road, just waiting for the right law to come along. And this timeline really shows you the whole journey. You can draw a straight line from this one little con man's case in 54 to Congress passing the RICO Act in 1970, all the way to today, where it's one of the most powerful and, frankly, most feared tools in federal law enforcement. Okay, so here's how it all connects. The RICO Act is all about going after criminal organizations by proving a pattern of racketeering activity. That's just a fancy way of saying they have to show the organization committed at least two underlying crimes, which they call predicate acts. And when Congress was writing this law, what did they include as a predicate act? You guessed it, mail fraud. And not just any mail fraud, that new super broad definition that came directly from the Pereira case.
So what does this mean in the real world? It's a total game changer for prosecutors. It means they can take all these seemingly separate acts, like mailing fraudulent invoices or sending illegal payments through the mail or transferring laundered money, and weave them all together. They can use these individual mailings to build a massive case that proves a whole criminal organization exists, instead of just prosecuting one person for one crime. So, when you boil it all down, what you're seeing is how this one kind of obscure legal decision from 70 years ago has these huge, echoing consequences today. The ghost of Pereira's con isn't just sitting in some dusty old law book. It's what gives prosecutors the muscle to take down massive criminal enterprises all over the world.
And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on, right? The law isn't always built on these big, dramatic moments. A lot of the time, it's built on these forgotten little stories, these obscure cases like Pereira's, each one with the power to reach decades into the future and completely reshape what we think of as justice.